Okay, so going down the line of the usual suspects. No, that's not the right, that's a different film. Okay, right, so first of all, we've got Harvey Harding, who's Group Managing Director of PM Property Lawyers based in Sheffield. We have Liana Laporto, Director of Liana Laporto Brown, in London, and also the current President of Property Mark. We've got Tony Piccirillo, who you met earlier. We've got Ben Smith, Group Director at Miles and Barr, which is a group of 13 branches, I think it is, estate agency branches in Kent. We've got Vicky Simpson, who is a partner at Boys and Morn, who are a 6-branch solicitor firm also based in Kent. And last but certainly not least, we have the well-known president of Property Mark a few years ago, Melvin Williams, who owns a 4-branch estate agency in North Wales and Anglesey. Gentlemen, over to you.
Thank you very much.
Excuse me. Thank you, Simon. When I first read this, I thought, that's not even a question. But upon reading it, there's actually 3 questions in the one sentence. So I think we'll do what we did earlier. We'll switch from panelist to panelist to start with. But if anybody out there wants to ask a question in between all this, please put your hand up and the mic will come to you, because we want some interaction from you as well, if possible. So the statement is, explore the key solutions that will improve your relationship with your agent conveyancer, question 1, speed up transactions, and ultimately deliver a better experience to the end customer.
So just a huge question. Then.
Well, you can pick any one of the 3 or all 3, Harvey. Because we know you've got the answers.
And, and the rules. We've been very polite this morning. I think it's time to get the gloves off and actually really get stuck in.
Fair enough.
Go for it.
Right. No.
Will Smith, here I come.
No. Oh, I don't like that idea. Anyway, there's a fair few things that we can reflect on what Paul has just said, actually. And the one thing I would go to immediately is information, or being a bit of a nerd, data. I'm very much an adopter of technology, not for the sake of it, but actually where it's actually going to improve the customer journey. And I always like to think of customers. I know we use the word client regularly, but we should provide a customer service like any other industry and make sure we're doing a good job, and that be the focus. And I think if everybody is aligned on that, we all end up in the same place. One very good way of getting there, and there is a prerogative to push for this at the moment, is ensuring we have that data upfront accessible in a way which we can use it. So that doesn't mean paper, it doesn't mean PDFs. Forms are beautiful, but it's actually the information in there that matters, and making sure we're all sharing that as early as possible. It can be in a tech way, and I love tech, so from my perspective, the more we can feed in via APIs or any other methods such as that is useful, but it's actually getting that information up front so the consumer knows whether what they think they're buying is what they are buying, and we can all make early decisions as far as that's concerned, whether that be agent, lawyer, surveyor, or otherwise, and move away from the assumptions of the past. So let's not value against Red Book. Let's actually look at what the real numbers, the real things are as far as it's concerned, so we know where we're going. From the Council of Mortgage Lenders, or UK Finance perspective, again, we know we've got this handbook which is growing and growing and growing and growing, which is one of the reasons transactions are taking longer. But if we can get to all the data we need to deal with that in the first place, we get through a lot of that early on. So I've left it at that point.
And who should be collecting all that data up front?
Well, that's a very good question. The one thing we can't do is wait for the government. If we wait for the government to actually say, you must do this at this point, that's not going to happen. We have to do it as a collective. We all need to work together as far as that's concerned to make sure we're getting the information as early as possible and then sharing it. Now, whether that be through such products as Cojuice, whether that be sharing updates seamlessly via Mio or other products are available, but the earlier we use all of this stuff and actually be able to join it up, then that works. One of the last things I'd like to say on tech on that point is, when we had the panel up here, which was a series of trees, that's lovely, but where's the wood? You know, we need to get to a point where we're actually pulling all this together so that whether it be one of the biggest solicitors or conveyancers out there, or one of the smallest who does a good job but doesn't want to be big, can actually get all of this information in a way that works for them. and not necessarily have to buy that product and 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 that product, because that'll stop it being adopted. The consumer doesn't care. The consumer just wants to move into that house so long as it's what they think. So we just need an easy path to that data to actually get to the end point.
And just to try and cheer up one of the headline sponsor, Kojuk could help like that?
I think Kojuk can help like that. Blockchain for the sake of blockchain, no, or any other shiny words, but actually if it's a product that's going to pull it all together in a seamless way that doesn't need a load more effort, so I hate double keying. I have to go from system to system to system to system to make sure everybody who is a stakeholder gets updated. If all of that can be in one place at one time that can be used by everybody, it makes sense.
I'm probably oversimplifying Kojuk, so I apologise now, Dan, but I see it like an extension cable from a plug socket. You've got one plug in there, but you can put 6, 8 or 10 in there, and that's how I think Kojuk will simply work.
Nice to know how your brain works. Liana, what's your answer to the second question?
I think it's having that one tree that works. We've got all these different trees, but actually having that information in one place. It's so piecemeal. How many dashboards can you have? How many demos can you have as an agent? I'm just speaking as an agent. But what I want to bring to the table is what we can do to make this process better as agents. And imagine if we sent a memorandum of sale and we had the land registry, registry plan, the property information questionnaire, which we've sat with our customers, our clients, and got on all of that information. You can't do a valuation without knowing if there are any covenants. So if we put in the crucial dates, birth, moving, schools, and all of that, if we had the proof of funds and the agreement in principle included in that memorandum, I'm just talking about what agents can do to help speed up this process. Correct names can delay for 2 weeks. Chain sheets, we mentioned the chain sheets before. And that could just, again, speed up this process. We've done a few tests of this by about 50%. So I think if we take on responsibility, all the prop tech and everything, it needs to be the person, it needs to be the agent that puts in that work up front and manages to get all of the information, ultimately to make the journey easier for everybody. Then, wouldn't that better the relationship between conveyancers and the agents? If you are sending a solicitor a memo with all of that information, they're going to want to work with you.
And do you think it would help if the seller instructed the conveyancer when the property is first marketed and you pass on that information then, rather than wait for offer and acceptance?
Absolutely. I do try and encourage that. We have to educate the consumer, the customer, to instruct someone. I think the fear is that they have to spend some money which they don't necessarily think that they might get back, but that's the process until exchange. So it's a little bit of an upfront investment, and it's, speaking to people in a way that they trust you and they take your advice and start the process very early on when you're on that valuation. Imagine going to viewings with all of that information and not having to refer back to see what the ground rent is. And then that would then feed into higher fees because you're an agent that knows what you're talking about, and you're referring to factual information, which is what Paul said, and which what Glyneth said about trying to raise the bar in general in our industry.
So out to the audience, do you think a universal property information form is doable? Yes, no, yeah?
That's accepted by Law Society.
Well, and accepted by the Law
Society,
Society.
yeah.
That's a good
Yeah,
question. So what about that as a question? Everyone goes quiet there.
There is an element to that, but you look at the home buying and selling group with the BASPI,
Yeah.
and my view on this has always been that if you go over and above what the Law Society deems you need to provide, then I can't see that can be an issue anyway.
They like to be part of it. They're not in the room, are they?
But even if there were, as an industry, we need to be saying to them, look, you need to move. You need to come with us on this. It isn't about vested interests anymore.
No.
And until that happens, we're all fighting a battle, which is
Well, I think
hard
to
to
a
win.
degree, Law Society are holding back the development of the BASPI a little bit, or have been in the past. They are playing ball a bit better now. But we better move on to Tony.
Yeah.
So nice to have you back on the panel, Tony.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can we have your comments, please?
So I think, the question, one of your questions was about service, so I want to pick on that really. So I think we live in very exciting times because all the things that everyone's talking about, we're almost on the cusp of being able to provide that. We're not there yet, but a lot of the information that you were talking about is actually available, and we produce it for our agents, so it's there. But really, when we're talking about service, I think IT is great, and we invest very heavily in IT. It's really important, but service is about picking up the phone, speaking to each other. That's what I define as service, and that really is what distinguishes you, because we're in a service industry, aren't we? So service is not just IT, and I know I spoke about it this morning. It's about us together. We can provide an amazing service, but it is speaking to each other first, understanding what each of our expectations of each other are, working together, and then delivering that to the customer. That's what I think service is.
I don't know. I get a feeling there is a bit of a meeting of minds going on. We're not hearing a lot from the audience, but I've just got a gut feeling that they're thinking, yes, this could happen.
Yeah.
And like we said earlier, you guys could be the forefront of this.
Yeah, and that's going to help the speed as well, because I think speed is taking far too long. It's embarrassing how long it takes nowadays, and I don't really know why it's got slower, but there's lots of compliance issues for the lawyers. It is tough for the legal industry. There's lots of lender requirements for the lawyers, and as they were saying earlier on, we've got to sign off on our liability on the properties. But if they attack the problems early, they get the information early, actually, the lawyers and the agents working together can take such a proactive stance, and this is really what's going to make you stand out. And I say, in this room, we've got the good guys here. Everyone is here, and they want to make a difference, and they're looking to make a difference. Just from a commercial point of view, let's be selfish about it. What a massive advantage we've got over the rest of the people that don't even know about the forum. It really is an exciting opportunity for people in this room and for the public, because they're going to vote with their feet at the end of the day. If they're getting service, they're going to go to where they get the service.
May I just jump in? Sorry. Honest, upfront information throughout the process from the start, and that's what it's all about, and that takes us up from that bottom 10%.
Are you going as far as possibly building a full property transaction pack with, title deeds, transfers, property information questionnaire, possibly even searches?
Definitely the property information questionnaire. The only worry I have with the searches is that they expire, and that's a journey that you don't want your client to go on from the start, because that loses the faith in the process.
There are...
Go on. I was going to say, on that statistically, if you look at it, with the validation period of a search, in most cases, most transactions will complete within that period. So I think that is interesting, but bearing in mind also, you can have validation insurance in certain cases and a lot of other things. I think searches shouldn't be the issue or the sticking point that necessarily it's been considered previously.
Yeah, and some searches can be refreshed. I know Richard Pickles from CDS is in the room. They will refresh searches. I don't really think that should be a barrier anymore.
Mel, you were sort of disagreeing then. Do you want
I was disagreeing with most transactions will complete in the period of the search. Search, I believe, is valid for about 6 months.
Yeah.
We can't just talk about the last 2 years of boom market. We've got to talk about the average. And there's many parts of the UK that it's quite average to have a property on the market for sale and available for in excess of 6 months before you find the buyer. So I don't believe that having a search in its current form is correct.
But if it could be refreshed...
But it's ridiculous that a search takes as long as it does to come back in this modern day. Yeah. And that's part of the issue.
Okay, so we've got universal PIF. Let's put a tick in that box, and it's everybody's job here to bring it to life. So Paul made that comment earlier. It's the responsibility of everybody to try and make that happen. I know that if I was still active in Winchester, I'd have my pet conveyancers, lawyers, etc., the people that I trusted, that I'd want to use, and I would sit down and talk to them. I spoke to Sean earlier, who said that he adopted a new philosophy with a state agency. He wrote to his 15 local lawyers, only 2 responded, and only 1 turned up to a meeting. So that says everything, really, in terms of the old world. I'd like to think that everybody in this room now, if their agent were to reach out to them and say, let's do better for our customers, that maybe the meeting of minds is now that seed is sown, and maybe Sean would get a better response. So thanks for that story, Sean. It's awesomely disappointing.
Well, maybe Simon and Sarah could set up local forums like this all over the country. I'm sure you can do that. Can you organise that tomorrow, please? Ben.
Yeah, I'm largely in agreement, to be quite honest. I'm a big advocate of information up front, legally preparing your clients as much as you possibly can, and importantly, having a vehicle to present that to your end customer, your buyers, so they can make their fully informed decisions. We, for the last couple of years, have been actually encouraging our vendors heavily to actually engage with that. But therein lies a bit of the problem. There's one thing, all of us being on board, and I think, like you say, there's a meeting of minds, but your clients have got to want to do it as well and actually put the time and effort into providing that information, filling out forms, finding guarantees, and at the moment, unless you educate those clients properly, that is a partial barrier. We're also working with a lot of clients that are speculative movers, potentially coming to the market, dipping their toe in the water, and therefore not really wanting to spend lots of time pulling all that information together with the idea that they may not actually move. So I think there are other barriers other than just estate agents and solicitors working together to make this happen. We've got to actually educate our consumers. That's where the government might actually have a helping hand, because it would force that part. But on the whole, getting people legally prepared and having the vehicle, whether it's Gazelle, we work with a company called Hive, with a product called iPax, and it is putting that information in front of the client to be able to make that informed decision. But at the moment, consumer kind of habit shows that they're not all engaged with.
Can I ask, how often is that taken up? The Hive?
So every single listing, but the property information part relies on that client actually sitting down, investing their own time to fill out what are quite arduous forms, finding guarantees and paperwork that might not be readily available. So again, we've got a big job to do as an industry to actually educate clients on that, really.
Isn't that down to the agent?
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
But
again,
I think there's a reluctance for agents to say to sellers, go and instruct a conveyancer or a solicitor. Is that the cost issue?
Yeah, I think a little bit. For us, encouraging people to instruct solicitors. I mean, we've got Vicky here from Boys and Morn, who we work closely for 20 years. So that's something we encourage clients to do as much as we can. But if it's a speculative move, again, to outlay finances when they may not actually end up moving is a barrier for
What do you mean by speculative move? Sorry, conveyancing.
I would just say someone that's dipping their toe in the water or worried that they're going to find a property that suits their needs, which inherent problem for us all at the moment is property stock's low. So clients generally at the moment are looking out there worried that they're actually going to find the property they want to buy anyway. So I think it's difficult to get people to spend money.
Yeah, Harvey?
Yeah,
So I was just going to say, ignore solicitors for that bit then, ignore conveyancers. You know what it is that we ask for in most cases, what information we're going to want up front, what we're going to need up front. So although it would be lovely to be instructed early on, the reality is that you can probably gather a load of that yourselves without them having to pay us anything.
I agree completely. It's just
But that doesn't help with the
physically do
onboarding
things,
process,
it's not
though,
as
does it? That you guys have to...
No, but I think there are that many solutions out there as far as onboarding goes now. I know we've got one in the room, again, others are available. We've done a fair bit of work with Third Fort, so that if Third Fort is the touch point at the early stage, whichever touch point that be, then we go with that throughout. Again, with what the government's doing with the Safe Harbour scheme, looking at around that, if we can get the one touch point on ID, we know what property information we need up front. Now, there will be outliers, but you look at it, 80% of what is going to be asked for is what's going to be needed most of the time. That means when we get to the exceptions, which is what the lawyers should be used for because we're the subject matter experts, we can concentrate on those bits as opposed to the easy stuff that can be gathered to start with anyway.
So, turning to you then, Vicky, you wouldn't feel threatened if agents did effectively some of your work up front?
Not at all. I'd welcome it because there are so many things that I need to be doing in terms of the legal process and so many boxes that I need to be ticking. I don't want to worry about whether someone's got a guarantee or a fencer certificate. If I had, new instructions, and to be fair, Miles & Bard do sort of pre-sales. So they've got somebody on the market, they then refer them to us, so we can do all of that in advance. But if I had an agent come to me with all of that information already there, that is going to save a lot of problems from our side of things, speed things up no end. And I think it also identifies some of the issues, as we were discussing, the idea that somebody has a lease that's only 65 years and the estate agents have been told in some way that, it's a 999-year lease. actually getting the title really early doors, you can identify that, you can fix the problem, and also you can mitigate and sort of deal with everyone's expectations really early doors, because if you know you need a lease extension, you've got to warn the client that there's going to be, you know, extra delays, and you can manage that expectation much better if everybody's sort of open.
So Ben, if you've got title documents up front and you saw a lease issue or short lease, etc., would you bring Vicky in earlier rather than later in those cases?
Ideally, yeah, without a doubt, yeah. I mean, it's, you know, any problem that's going to raise its head later down the line, it's better dealt with early on. You're just pushing a problem down the road otherwise, and you know, there's no surprise why 33% of sales in the UK fall through.
Tony, you'll know this because of your North End days. Portsmouth is an area that's heavily bombed in the war and it's got lease problems. So why do conveyancers or lawyers not actually educate agents that that's the best practice?
That's a great question. I don't know what the answer is. They should do. I mean, you know, I think agents, it's partly two things. I think sometimes agents don't want to hear it. I mean, say, okay, we've got good agents in the room, they probably want to hear about it, but lots of agents don't want to. And, you know, I think sometimes there's a feeling with lawyers that they're the ones presenting problems to the agents, and the agents, and they think that, well, they're not going to like us. It's crazy. It's crazy, isn't it? People should be embracing and understanding about problems like Ben is. But I think it's not like that in reality.
I think the problem with a lot of agents, the first thought in an agent's mind is just win the listing.
Yeah.
They don't want to be seen as the barrier to actually winning that instruction.
I get that, Ben, because I'm an agent and I've sat in the living room thousands of times. Do you not think that that's a misplaced sense of positioning, though, in that actually by talking about it, you're going to win the instruction?
100%. If I'm on your page, but unfortunately there's a lot of agents out there that don't feel like that.
Yeah.
And they don't even think about, you know, bringing the problem to the forefront to deal with it, act actually as a professional rather than just as a salesperson. And until we get more agents working in that kind of way, then you're at the mercy, aren't you? And
Yes.
This is where the race to the bottom on
Big
fees.
training need, isn't it?
Maybe
It's
qualified.
quite complex, isn't it?
Yeah.
Once qualification,
Yeah.
then this will be standard practice. So you're
Yeah.
qualified and you know exactly what's expected.
Or make it mandatory.
Mel, what's your take on all this, please?
Well, I think at the end of the day, the customer's got to come central to it all, and what do they want? And more importantly, what does the next generation want? A lot of the next generation don't even talk to each other anymore, they just Snapchat each other. So what kind of information are they going to want in the next 5 or 10 years? And I think, you know, we have the land registry that's there. I take on board what you said about we can't get the government to push things, but that's a good starting point where perhaps could be built on. There's an element of trust that people need. EPCs now have a central database which everybody trusts, and they can just simply get the EPC from. And we just need to make it as simple as possible. There'll always be the grey areas where you'll need the solicitors to interpret any conditions or covenants. There is a danger in giving those restrictive covenants up front that you just won't get anybody looking at the property because they don't understand them. Yeah. So it's a case of educating. And I do agree, you need to get as much information as you can up front, but it's then how that's portrayed to the potential buyers, because a lot of agents are always in fear of getting sued for saying the wrong things now compared to how they were years ago. And it's just a case of delivering and moving forward, and as we've said, working together better and sharper and more efficient.
Interesting.
So do you think these material information changes when they come in, parts B and C, and restrictive covenants are in there and tenures in there, it will force agents and conveyancers together a bit more?
I think
Because the restrictive covenant will need looking at, etc.?
You've got to have a level playing field. As Ben mentioned, you've got some agents, their only aim in life is to get the instruction, not to give the best advice, to win the instruction. And until that changes, where you've got the level playing field, it sort of forces the hand of the more professional agents to a certain degree. Most of them will win when they're given that opportunity. But people don't want barriers to getting the house on the market.
But they won't win the instruction if the customer, client, has got more knowledge than them.
Correct.
Yeah. So we could actually educate the customer base, which is quite interesting. I would like to talk about the elephant in the room. So we've sort of got an opinion.
We've got a lot of elephants in the room.
We have.
I've got a herd of elephants.
It's like a bloody zoo.
The gentleman sat next to Angie. I don't know your name, sir. Mark asked about referral fees. I did promise that I'd touch on it, didn't I? So if referral fees were banned, I'll create a picture now. If referral fees were banned, and that meant that conveyancing could actually increase their fee, would the transactional process speed up?
Can I give you an answer that you don't want?
Always.
Okay, so not only have I got conveyancing firms,
Yeah.
of which I think it counts 7 at the moment, I've got 15 law firms in total,
Yeah.
some of which are personal injury law firms, uninsured loss recovery law firms, litigation firms. And when those referral fees were banned, we created several joint ventures, several ABSs, several marketing schemes, several other ways of paying referral fees, exactly the same as we did before, without calling them referral fees. So the question in itself has to be thought about slightly differently, because referral fees may well be paid whether referral fees are paid or not paid.
I wonder if it's a red herring, because in the heat of the moment when a solicitor's looking at a file, are they sitting there thinking, oh, I'm only paying £100 referral fee on this one, or I'm not paying anything, I'll give that one a bit more attention. As an agent, am I thinking, have I got 2% on this one, have I got 1%? You're just dealing with the moment, the client, the property, the inquiry. I don't think the actual cost of that referral comes into your thoughts. I mean,
I think
solicitors on
a
the
lot
panel,
of-
you can answer that maybe.
Well,
But
A lot of that, though, depends on the culture and the ethos of your staff and your team.
Yeah.
We've instilled a culture where the most important thing to us is getting what's right for the client, getting the sale through as quick as we can. Referral fee is not even on the agenda in our company. We're not interested in that. We're interested in the conveyance and the solicitor who we can work well with and who does work well with us. And that's the most important thing.
And that was the
That's
feedback
stood
from
us in
most
good
guild
stead.
members.
The one thing it can make a difference with is customer perception of the lawyer's service. So if customer is paying, I don't know, call it £600 for that service, and there is no referral fee, or £1,500 for that service, but the solicitor is only getting the same net, one client is going to expect a lot more than the other, even if that same fee is the same fee.
I mean, from my conversations with James Monroe, Trading Standards, I don't think referral fees will ever be banned. He doesn't think they'll be banned. My view is, I think they should be capped at maybe a 5, 10, 15, 20% level of the legal fee. But if you ban them, they'll just change or go underground back as it was in the 70s and 80s, and that's brown paper bags under restaurant tables.
I think that from the agent side of things as well, that your first thought shouldn't be about what your referral fee is to the solicitor. You should be working with a solicitor that you're confident in, that you work well with, that's going to see the transaction through. What your referral fee ends up being after that is probably, it's got to be secondary. Because if the deal doesn't go through, you don't get your fee anyway. So, you know, your first starting point's got to be the solicitors that you work with for your client's benefit.
Have we got any comments or questions coming up from the audience? Yes, please. A microphone. Yep, you. Yep. Behind you, the mic, sorry.
No.
You can stand up, you can
I'll
dance.
sit down, it's easier. I'll look the same size either way. You're going to regret inviting me, Tony. I'm Murray Lee. Thank you for the invite. And
Hello, thank you.
Hello, everybody. I've been at this a very long time. I know I may not look it, a very, very long time, maybe outstrip most of you. I don't think the transactions have got any quicker since I first started, when there wasn't all the IT and the tech around. My main worry is that I think we're focused on too much IT and communications getting left out. I phone solicitors, no disrespect, guys, this may be divisive. You don't phone me back. I email you, I don't get an email back. I need to know what's going on. I'm sitting here waiting on an exchange to happen this afternoon, and 3 or 4 things weren't sorted out when they were raised in January. If I'd have known about it, I'd be sitting here saying, thank you very much, where do I send my account to? Why can't there be more communication? The IT, the information prior is fine. And by the way, my company don't even consider referral fees. I have lists of solicitors we speak to, and if they give me the service that we get, I give them the business. I don't care whether I get a fee out of them or not at all. It's communication, guys. We've got to keep communicating with each other.
Yeah.
All the agents in the room have just clapped. All the conveyancers are quiet. Any conveyancers going to respond to that in the audience?
Most definitely. I think absolutely communication is the key, but it's building those relationships and finding out how it best works for both parties. You know, what we don't want is an estate agent who one person in their office calls, you know, first thing on a Monday morning, then you've got the next person who calls at 10 o'clock, the next person who calls at 11. What we need is to have those conversations and say, actually, the way it works best for you is that I give you a table, we update once a week, or that I speak on the telephone, or, you know, in certain circumstances you text me and I know, oh, we need to do something. So that you've got those different methods and it works differently for different people.
I can understand the junior negotiator calling you on a Monday morning at 9 a.m. to see, check on the sale that isn't quite even close to exchanging can be a bit of a pain. But it is that open communication if you've got a more senior negotiator. So it's just about having that trust and that communication.
And I think,
Vic, I've got just a quick question. Vic, have you ever written to agents or communicated with agents as to your preferred method of communication?
Yes, I do, regularly.
That's awesome.
I do regularly. We have new build developments that we deal with on a sort of table, on an email. We speak to Miles and Bar regularly about how best to work with them. And in fact, as a firm, we do training with estate agents. And so that we understand what they need and what we need, and we can build something that works better together.
On that point, I received an email saying, I don't respond to emails from a solicitor for 3 days, so please don't chase me or ask my clients to chase me for 3 days. So that's, that time frame can't work.
Is that only in the last 2 years when it's been particularly busy and tough? I'd like to think it's definitely got worse since then.
It's definitely got worse since then.
So with all this tech, how is it getting worse?
okay. I'll just
caseloads.
I'll put a conveyancer's hat on and maybe happily shot down for this briefly. But email is the devil's work. An email can be sent and then sent again and then sent again and then sent again. And then within 5 minutes you get a phone call saying, have you got that email? And another phone call and then another email and then another phone call. When actually what it needed to be is something that was considered potentially for a period of time. Because when it gets to the lawyer, generally it's not a yes-no answer. It's something that may well need to be considered. Now, a good lawyer will say, thanks for that, I'll come back to you, bye. But I can sympathise to an extent with an immediacy of response. Legal services aren't necessarily something that you can immediately respond to with a, yeah, I've checked all your covenants right now and you can keep a cat in your flat, or whatever it might be. Sometimes there is a time period which is needed to respond to something in a reasoned way, having reviewed it. So, yes, it needs fielding better, but sometimes it isn't going to be immediate. I think, can I just go on to the other point which that gentleman made, which is things take longer. What we have to do now as conveyancers has doubled, if not tripled, in the time I've been doing it. There is massive scope creep. As an industry, we should have pushed back and said, no, somebody's got to do it. I don't know who that might be. So sometimes things take longer because we've got a heck of a lot more to do than we used to have to do.
I'm not disputing it take longer. I'm not saying that what I'm saying is if you tell us what's causing the hold-up.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm hands-on, and I have been for all the time I've been doing this. And if I spot a problem, starting from the minute I send you the EPC with my sales memo, which you then guys say, oh, could you send me the EPC already?
Yeah, agreed. And if there's a problem, we should be working with you guys to resolve that.
Yeah. I think we've got a question. One last question because we're out of time.
It was just when we were talking about the communication bit.
And the mic.
Sorry, just going back to, I didn't have a question as such, I was just responding to conveyancers don't communicate. And I think, conveyancers are very undervalued and the work that they do is under-recognised. And as we've said earlier, and as I think it is recognised out there, there is a shortage of conveyancers out there, but by tarnishing the good ones and viewing them all the same that they, don't communicate, it's actually, it makes us not respect agents. And what we've already said here in the room is we've got the people that are forward thinkers. And I recognise that there are, law firms out there that don't communicate, but they're the ones that not are in the room. Yeah. So we need to move forward with that sort of old-style attitude that, we hold up transactions, and that's what's making people leave the industry from the legal side, and that's where we need to bring more people in. But if conveyancers constantly get a bad press, or are constantly the ones that hold up the transactions without recognising the work that they do and that they do very well, and that they got so many transactions over the line last year when in short supply the Chancellor introduced a stamp duty incentive that sent the industry crazy. We did a really, really good job, and I'm speaking on behalf of all conveyancers here, and then to sit in a room and say, we're slow and we don't communicate, I think, it's under-recognised if we're going to look forward thinking.
I agree.
And if you want to send any work to my firm.
That's the point, though. That's the point, though, isn't it? That actually, we've been talking about elephants in the room. The elephants aren't in this room. The good companies, we should be working together to actually bring the
Setting-
standard
setting
up
standard.
and using each other's resources to actually bypass the poor ones
Yeah.
at the moment.
Agreed. And you've got a comment?
Hello. Right, I think that if I've taken anything out of today, listening to the conveyancers, is that when I get back to my office tomorrow, believe me, I'll be contacting every single solicitor I deal with and asking to have a meeting. And I think that it should be the same for the solicitors. If you've got agents that you know are active in your town, you need to be getting in touch with them. It can't be a one-way street, because I think it is communication.
I agree.
I've sat and taken on board some of the comments and I think about all the emails that I send that are quite caustic. You know, maybe I do need to talk to people about it, but I think it's been really great, honestly.
That's really good. We're in a world now of tolerance, aren't we? As you compare the world in general, the general world of, just acceptance of people and who they are and whether they've got a gender or no gender, whatever it may be. I don't want to go into it's a tolerant society that we now live in, and yet probably in this sector there's a lack of tolerance. And so it's actually time to just wake up a little bit, isn't it? And recognise that nobody goes to work in the morning and says, right, I'm going to really mess things up today. Do they? Nobody does that. Nobody goes to work with that intention. Everybody goes to work with the intention of doing a great job for themselves, for their customers, and for their families. And actually, that's the bit that we just need to take away from that. And you've summed it up beautifully. Go and communicate. Go and pick up the bleeding phone and have a chat.
And thank you goes a long way.
A thank you goes a really long way. It really does. Both ways.
We write to all the solicitors that we regularly deal with, who are our top people that we communicate with.
Yeah.
We send them all a hamper at Christmas. We thank them. And we
Amazing.
call around and see them. And not just the solicitors, the staff on the front line in their offices as well.
Yeah.
And it just makes a big difference.
Yeah.
I didn't get my hamper mail.
You're not convincing.
We're over time, Ian.
Yeah, we're good. It was worth it, though, I think. It was really worth it. Good. I think that's it.
Unless there's any final questions, sorry. Oh, there's one over there.
Hello. So everyone here is talking about relationships, and I think in times gone by, it was always same solicitor, same estate agent in the same town, but things have moved on heavily now, and I think we keep talking about relationships, about towns and local firms, but how do you face the challenge when people are instructing solicitors online who are 300 miles away from the estate agents? How do you deal with that challenge of having good relationships with those estate agents that aren't local? How are you going to deal with that?
Zoom.
I think relationships are really important.
Zoom.
Absolutely.
Great question.
You know, how do you build relationships with thousands of estates that, you know, are not your local, you might never speak to again, because it just so happens that one person has instructed that solicitor 300 miles away because they got the cheapest quote from them. And
Yeah.
Zoom. Let's communicate. Now we've gone through COVID. We're all used to a Zoom. I mean, well, let's communicate. Let's have that instead of typing, as you said, sending emails. Then, if I'm going to take something away from today, is to have more visual contact with. But then the solicitors or the conveyancers have to have time to do that. So it's a two-way street, isn't it?
I think it's what we were saying earlier on. It's about mutual respect, isn't it? Sometimes you get some really aggressive calls from agents. And to be honest with you, we try not to be hypersensitive at our place. We know that they've been tarnished by having some really bad experiences. So they end up being aggressive with you. They want to save the deal as much as you do. So we try to just respect them as well, and like anyone's irate, you try and just calm them down. So I think you can easily build relationships. I mean, we work nationwide, and you don't have to be seeing someone all the time. You pick up a phone and you speak to people. I think that's what it comes down to. And if you speak to them with respect, some of our best agents are nowhere near us. We've got great relationships. I would consider them my friends, but I don't see them all the time.
And a good agent will try to preempt the problem as well. Yeah. So that they'll speak, they think, this is going to go pear-shaped. Can you, X, Y, Z needs doing, can you try and get it done by
I think it's what we were talking about earlier on.
Managing the people, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I also think it's a myth in this day and age that conveyancers slow things down for their own purposes because they charge more. They don't charge. And they're not on the bloody golf course anymore. They're in the office
Bear in mind, we only get paid at the end.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah.
At the end of the day, people are following the client's instructions, aren't they? And sometimes, people are told, look, I need you to slow this down, and solicitors having to do it, but sometimes cannot come out and say that. And that's fine. They're following the client's instructions. But agents need to respect what's going on and vice versa.
I think to the lady's point there that, relationships, you can't build it with a one-off transaction with a solicitor you rarely deal with or an agent you rarely deal with, but it's simple with the very initial, just an introduction call, introduce yourself, how would you like to work, and just set your agendas between each other from the outset so it's clear, there's no, You know, there's no grey area.
Try and post your service standards.
Yeah.
Send them
Yeah.
the memo, send them the chain checkers, send them the
and just
PIF.
agree things early on.
Yeah.
You know, that builds a relationship, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, I want to go down the pub and have a pint with you. It could just be, we know how each other want to work, and let's, you know, carry on
I
with
think
that.
it's taking that time to have that adult conversation, because quite often I imagine, you know, lawyers are scared of getting that call, because sometimes it is very aggressive.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's easier to duck a call. No, it's not right. We don't do it. You know, we make our lawyers answer the call, but actually it's quite scary. Conveyancers here. Isn't it scary sometimes?
You're scarier than us.
Thank you. Don't tell us that. But actually, it's quite scary. And we say we should be respecting each other. And I think it's a matter of just picking up the phone and just having adult conversations at the start of a transaction. And that defines it. It's, you know, it's much easier to make the call now, and it's a bit uncomfortable, than wait for 2 weeks down the line when everyone's agreed their exchange dates, the agents lined everyone up. That's how you lose deals. You lose deals because sometimes there's a breakdown in communication, and I'm not saying it's the agent, I'm not saying it's the lawyer. It's a bit of both. It's a bit of everyone. But I worked as an agent, and when you speak to your lawyer and you say, can I exchange on Friday? And the lawyer says, yeah, I'll be ready. He's not really probably thought into, you know, is the deposit going to be with me? Is the report, is the chain going to be ready? But the agent goes off and sells that to the rest of the chain. That's how you lose deals. Because Mrs. Smith, who wanted to move on Friday, you've just told her she's going to move on Friday. Well, she ain't not moving Friday. So it's not the law. I'm not saying it's the lawyer's fault, but it's what I was talking about earlier on. We've got to do this principle, seek to understand, and then to be understood. You know, you've got to speak to each other. You've got to be understanding what rules you're playing by. Even the communication and language you use is just completely different. And we just, you know, I had a slide there with this two people building a bridge. You know, the bridge is they're very close to each other, but not actually linking. And that's what we need to do. We need to link it together. So actually, we're just building a coherent service for the clients
But
to get them to move.
it's more than just a communication, it's training of the teams as well. It's education and the knowledge. And because in our offices, our best office, our most experienced office, where there's only 7% fall through rate. You know, and that's because they're older people who've been at it longer and they know what they're doing and they can see problems arising.
Yeah.
So it's all about training, qualifications, education, communication, respect. And I think together we can all make it better.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Good.
I think we need to thank the panel and move on, because you're going to do a great summary for the audience, and I'm going to be your wingman on that.
Oh, is that right? Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
absolutely. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.